After 3 years of caring for my dying mother, my brother and sister showed up at the lawyer's office, demanding I split her $2 million estate. "You manipulated her," my brother said. "He's a lawyer. He should have known better." I smiled and asked the mediator if I could play a video. "Your Honor," I said, "my mother left me something they didn't know about." Good afternoon, dear listeners. It's Emma here. I'm glad you're with me today. Please like this video and listen to my story until the end. And let me know which city you're listening from, so I can see how far my voice has traveled. I want to tell you about the 3 years that changed my life, about family, and about the moment I learned that love and loyalty are not always the same thing. My name is Linda Chen. Most people in the Sunset District of San Francisco knew me as the owner of Golden Phoenix, a small Cantonese restaurant my parents started in 1978. I took it over when they retired in 2003. For 20 years, I worked 70-hour weeks, standing over woks in a kitchen that reached 100 degrees in summer, greeting regulars by name, making sure the salt and pepper squid was crispy the way Mrs. Wong liked it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I was proud of it. I am 64 years old now, never married, no children. The restaurant was my child. My mother, Rose Chen, used to tell me I should have found a husband, had a family. I would tell her the restaurant was my family. She would shake her head, but she understood. She and my father had built that same restaurant from nothing. I have 2 siblings. My older brother, David, 67, left San Francisco for Chicago 30 years ago to practice corporate law. He made partner at a firm whose name has too many syllables. He visited maybe once every 3 years, always briefly, always with an air of having more important places to be. And my younger sister, Amy, 59, married a cardiologist and moved to Palo Alto. She had the big house, the country club membership, the life our parents had wanted for all of us. She visited more than David, but her visits felt like obligations. She would check her watch, mention her tennis lesson, leave before dessert. In the fall of 2021, my mother called me at the restaurant during lunch service. I almost didn't answer. We were slammed, and I was working the wok station because one of my cooks had called in sick. But something made me step into the small office and pick up. "Linda," she said, and her voice had a quality I didn't recognize. Uncertain. My mother was never uncertain. "I went to Dr. Patel today. He wants me to see a specialist." That was how it started. A phone call during lunch rush, between orders of chow mein and sweet and sour pork. The diagnosis was Alzheimer's disease, early to moderate stage. Dr. Morrison, the neurologist at UCSF, was kind but direct. She had maybe 3 to 5 years. The decline would be gradual, then steep. She would need increasing care, eventually round-the-clock supervision. I sat in that appointment with my mother, in a consultation room with pale blue walls and a window overlooking the parking garage. And I watched her process the information. She was 86, small and bird-like, her hair completely white. She had lived alone since my father died in 2015. She was independent, sharp, proud, and now someone in a white coat was telling her that her mind was going to betray her. She didn't cry. She thanked the doctor, collected the pamphlets about support groups and care options, and we walked to my car in silence. In the parking garage, before I started the engine, she turned to me and said, "What places?" I asked, though I knew. "Those homes. With the people in wheelchairs in the hallway, I want to stay in my house." "Okay," I said. "David and Amy won't help," she said. Not bitterly, just as fact. David has his career. Amy has her life. It will be you. I looked at her. She looked back. We both knew what this meant. "Okay," I said again. I called David that night. He was in a meeting. I left a message. He called back 3 days later. When I told him about the diagnosis, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "Let me know if you need help researching facilities. There are some very good memory care places in the Bay Area." I called Amy. She answered, but I could hear she was driving. "Oh God," she said when I told her. "Poor Mom. Listen, I'm headed to Pilates, but we should definitely talk about options. There's a place in Menlo Park that's supposed to be amazing. Very expensive, but if we all chip in." Neither of them offered to help care for her. Neither of them suggested changing their lives in any way. They offered money for a facility and advice about which facility to choose. I made my decision that week. I would close the restaurant. I would move into my mother's house. I would take care of her myself. Let me be honest about why I made that choice, because I think honesty is the only thing worth offering. Part of it was love. She was my mother. She had raised me, fed me, worked brutal hours so I could have a better life. But part of it was also something else. Something I'm not entirely proud of but won't pretend didn't exist. I had spent my whole life in that restaurant. 70-hour weeks for 20 years. No husband, no children, no life outside the kitchen. And a small voice in my head asked, what if I kept going for another 20 years? What would I have at the end except aching feet and calloused hands? Maybe caring for my mother was also a way to care for myself, to step off the treadmill I'd been on since I was 25. I told my staff in November 2021. I sold the business in January 2022 to a young couple from Hong Kong. They kept the name, kept most of the recipes, kept some of the staff. I watched them sign the papers and felt something complicated. Relief, grief, fear, freedom, all mixed together until I couldn't separate them. I moved into my mother's house on Noriega Street in February 2022. It was the house I grew up in, a narrow 3-bedroom with jade plants in the front yard and my father's tools still in the garage. My mother's bedroom was downstairs. I took my old bedroom upstairs. For the first 6 months, it was manageable. She could still dress herself, make simple meals, remember most things. I took her to doctor's appointments, managed her medications, did the grocery shopping and cooking. We developed routines, oatmeal with bananas for breakfast, walks around the neighborhood in the afternoon when she felt up to it. Old Cantonese movies in the evening that she'd seen 100 times but still enjoyed. David called maybe once a month. "How's she doing?" he'd ask. I'd tell him. "That's good," he'd say. "Let me know if you need anything." Then back to his cases, his clients, his important life in Chicago. Amy visited twice in those first 6 months. Both times, she stayed less than 2 hours. She would sit with Mom, make cheerful small talk, then find me in the kitchen and ask how I was holding up, but in a way that suggested she didn't really want details. "You're so good with her," she'd say. "I just don't have the patience." As if patience was a personality trait and not a choice. By the end of 2022, my mother needed help bathing. By mid-2023, she sometimes forgot my name. By late 2023, she needed help with everything. Dressing, eating, using the bathroom. She would wake up at 3 a.m. convinced she needed to go to work. She would ask where my father was, and I would have to tell her again that he died and watch her grieve it fresh. Then she'd forget again by dinner. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than running a restaurant during the 2008 recession. Harder than the year I worked with a herniated disc because I couldn't afford time off. This was different. This was watching the woman who raised me disappear in pieces, slowly, while she was still sitting in front of me. I used my savings from selling the restaurant to hire a part-time aide 3 days a week. Grace was from the Philippines, gentle and competent. On the days she came, I could sleep past 6 a.m. I could go to the grocery store without rushing. Small mercies. David visited once in 3 years. Christmas 2023. He stayed for dinner, gave Mom a poinsettia she didn't recognize, and left the next morning. He told me I was doing a great job, as if I were his employee receiving a performance review. Amy came more often, maybe every 2 months, but her visits had a quality of checking a box. She'd bring flowers, sit with Mom for 30 minutes, then head back to Palo Alto. Once, she said, "You should really consider a facility, Linda. This can't be good for you." I asked if she'd help pay for it. She said, "Well, Mom has money, doesn't she? She should use it for her own care." What she meant was, use Mom's money so Amy wouldn't have to chip in. My mother died on the 12th of March 2025. In her sleep, in her own bed, in the house my father bought in 1976. I found her in the morning, when I went to help her get dressed. She looked peaceful. I sat with her for a long time before I called anyone. I held her hand, which was still warm, and I told her she could rest now. The funeral was small. Maybe 30 people. Old neighbors, her church friends, a few former restaurant customers who remembered her. David flew in from Chicago. Amy drove up from Palo Alto. They both cried. I'm sure their grief was real. Grief is complicated. You can neglect someone for 3 years and still cry at their funeral. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks later at the office of Thomas Brennan, estate attorney my mother had used since the 90s. I didn't think much about it. I assumed she'd split everything 3 ways. The house, her savings, her investments. Maybe 2 million total, probably less. 600,000 each, minus taxes and expenses. I arrived at Tom Brennan's office on a Thursday morning. David and Amy were already there, sitting in the conference room. David in his $1,000 suit, Amy in pearls and cashmere. They both hugged me. Amy said I looked tired. David said we'd get through this together. Tom was 70, kind, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He offered us coffee. We declined. He opened a folder and began to read. The important part came about halfway through. After specific bequests of jewelry and personal items, after burial instructions and charitable donations, he read, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including my residence, at 2847 Noriega Street, all bank accounts, investments, and personal property, to my daughter Linda Chen, in recognition of her devoted care during my final years. The room went very quiet. I'm sorry, Amy said. Can you read that again? Tom did. Everything? David's voice was sharp. The entire estate goes to Linda? That's what the will states. Tom said calmly. Your mother revised her will in February 2025, 1 month before her death. It was properly witnessed and notarized. I can provide copies. I sat very still. I hadn't known. My mother had never told me. This is insane, Amy said. Linda, did you know about this? No, I said. When was the previous will? David asked Tom. 2015. Shortly after your father's death. That one divided the estate equally among the 3 children. David leaned back in his chair. I could see him thinking, calculating. She had Alzheimer's, he said. She wasn't competent to change her will. Actually, Tom said, I have a letter from her neurologist, Dr. Morrison, at UCSF, dated February 2025, stating that Mrs. Chen, while experiencing memory issues, retained legal capacity to make decisions about her estate. She understood what she owned and who she wanted to inherit it. I want to contest this, David said. That's your right, Tom said. But I should tell you that your mother was very clear about her intentions. She came to this office with Linda. had a long conversation with me about her wishes, and was firm in her decision. Amy was looking at me. Did you pressure her? Yet. No, I said. You had to have said something. You were the only one there. I didn't know she was changing her will, I said again. This is convenient, David said, his lawyer voice cold and sharp. You isolate her for 3 years, and suddenly, the whole estate goes to you. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Isolate her? You know what I mean. I cared for her, I said quietly. Every single day, for 3 years. Where were you? I have a career, David said. I couldn't just drop everything, but I could. You chose to close your restaurant, Amy said. The meeting ended badly. David said he'd be in touch with his lawyers. Amy said she needed time to think. I took my copy of the will and left. I called Tom Brennan the next day. I know, he said. I'll refer you to someone who handles estate litigation. Her name is Margaret Sato. She's very good. Margaret Sato had an office in the financial district with a view of the Bay Bridge. She was 45, precise, with short black hair and glasses. I liked her immediately. She didn't waste time on sympathy. She asked questions. Did your mother have capacity when she changed the will? Dr. Morrison said yes. Did anyone witness undue influence? You, pressuring her? Isolating her? From your siblings? Grace, the aide, was there 3 days a week. Neighbors visited. I never prevented anyone from seeing her. Did your siblings visit during those 3 years? David once. Amy, maybe 10 times. She nodded. In California, to contest a will based on undue influence, they need to prove you isolated her, manipulated her, and that she was vulnerable to that manipulation. If she had medical clearance for capacity and witnesses to your care, it's a weak case. But they'll try? They will absolutely try. Your brother's a lawyer. He knows how to drag this out. But Linda, here's what you need to understand. Probate contests are expensive, slow, and ugly. They will say terrible things about you. They will try to paint you as someone who took advantage of a dying woman. Can you handle that? I thought about my mother asking me not to put her in a facility. I thought about 3 a.m. wake-ups and the smell of soap and the weight of her when I helped her to the bathroom. I thought about the fact that I had given up 3 years of my life, maybe the last good years I had, to keep a promise. Yes, I said. I can handle it. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. David and Amy. Chen versus the estate of Rose Chen. They claimed undue influence, lack of capacity, and elder abuse. Elder abuse. As if I hadn't spent 3 years keeping her comfortable, keeping her dignity, keeping her home. The discovery process was invasive and cruel. They wanted medical records, financial records, phone records. They wanted to depose Grace, the aide. They wanted to depose the neighbors. They were looking for any scrap of evidence that I had controlled or manipulated my mother. Margaret prepared me for depositions. They'll try to rattle you, she said. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate. David hired a lawyer from his own firm in Chicago, a man named Harrison Pierce, who spoke in paragraphs and smiled like a shark. In my deposition, he asked about finances. Isn't it true you were struggling financially after closing your restaurant? I used the proceeds from selling it. But those were running out, weren't they? I was managing. Did you see your mother's estate as a solution to your financial problems? The implication was disgusting. I looked at him and said, I saw my mother as my mother. That's why I took care of her. They deposed Grace. She told them I was kind, patient, never raised my voice, never prevented visitors. They deposed Mrs. Nguyen from next door. She said the same thing. They were building a case. But the foundation was hollow. Then Margaret found something. She was reviewing medical records from UCSF when she noticed a note in Dr. Morrison's files from January 2025, 1 month before the will was changed. It said, "Patient insists on video recording to document wishes. Wants family to understand her decision. Arranged for videography next week." Margaret called me. "Did your mother make a video?" I remembered. It had been a strange day, Doctor. Morrison had mentioned at an appointment that some patients found it helpful to record their thoughts while they still could. Messages for family, explanations of wishes. My mother had latched on to the idea. A week later, a videographer came to the house. My mother sat in her living room and spoke to the camera for about 20 minutes. I had been there, but I'd stepped out partway through because she said she wanted privacy for some of it. "Yes," I told Margaret. "In January. Do you have the video?" I think Dr. Morrison's office kept a copy. Margaret got the video. When she called me after watching it, her voice had changed. "Linda, this changes everything. I need you to come to my office tomorrow. Don't tell your siblings anything." I watched the video in Margaret's conference room. My mother was sitting in her favorite chair, the green one, by the window. She looked small and tired, but her eyes were clear. It was one of her good days. She started by stating her name, the date, and that she was making this video of her own free will. Then she said, "I want my children to know why I'm leaving everything to Linda. David, Amy, I love you both. You're my children. But love and duty are not the same thing. For 3 years, Linda gave up her life to take care of me. She closed her restaurant. She moved into my house. She bathed me, fed me, sat with me on the bad days when I didn't know where I was. She never complained. She never made me feel like a burden. David, you visited once in 3 years. Once. Amy, you came more often, but never for long. You both have your own lives, and I understand that. I'm not angry, but I can't pretend it doesn't matter. Linda earned this inheritance, not because she manipulated me or isolated me, because she loved me enough to sacrifice her own life for mine. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. And if you're fighting over my money, then you've proven exactly why Linda deserves it. This is my decision. I'm clear-headed today. Dr. Morrison confirmed I have capacity. This is what I want." The video was 22 minutes long. She went on to explain specific bequests, talk about memories with each of us, express love, but that core explanation, delivered in her own voice with her face right there on camera, was unassailable. "This wins the case," Margaret said. The mediation was scheduled at the San Francisco Superior Court for early June. David and Amy came with Harrison Pierce. I came with Margaret. The mediator was a retired judge named Barbara Kelso, 70, no nonsense. Harrison presented their case. Undue influence, isolation, vulnerability. He made me sound like a calculating predator who'd seen an opportunity and seized it. He was persuasive. If I hadn't lived through those 3 years, I might have believed him. Then Margaret stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that directly addresses Mr. Pierce's claims. This is a video recording made by Rose Chen on the 15th of January 2025, approximately 1 month before she revised her will. She made it in the presence of Dr. Morrison from UCSF, who has provided an affidavit confirming Mrs. Chen's capacity at the time." She pressed play. I watched David's face as our mother spoke. I watched Amy. David went stone still, his jaw tight. Amy's eyes filled with tears almost immediately. When the video ended, the room was silent. Harrison cleared his throat. "This video doesn't negate the possibility of prior undue influence." "Yes, it does," Judge Kelso said. She looked at David and Amy. Your mother explicitly states this is her free decision and explains her reasoning. Unless you have evidence of manipulation prior to this recording, I don't see how you proceed. We'd like a recess to confer with our clients, Harrison said. They left the room. Margaret and I sat in silence. After 10 minutes, they came back. Amy's face was blotchy from crying. David looked older than I'd ever seen him. We'd like to discuss settlement, Harrison said. There's nothing to settle, Margaret said. The will is clear. The video supports it. Your clients are welcome to continue litigation, but I'll be filing for sanctions for a frivolous contest. David looked at me for the first time. Did you know she made that video? I knew she made a video, I said. I didn't know what she said. She wanted privacy for part of it. Amy's voice was small. I should have visited more. Yes, I said. Not unkindly, just truth. They dropped the contest that day. The estate was settled in my favor. The house, the investments, the savings, after taxes and legal fees, about $1.8 million. Amy called me 2 weeks later. Can we have coffee? We met at a place in the Sunset, near Mom's house. My house now. Amy looked tired. She apologized. Not for contesting the will, exactly, but for not being there. I thought you had it handled, she said. I didn't realize how hard it was. It was very hard, I said. Are we okay? She asked. I thought about that. We can be, I said. But it's different now. She nodded. She understood. David never apologized. He went back to Chicago and we haven't spoken since. I don't expect we will. I used some of the money to reopen a smaller version of Golden Phoenix in the Richmond district. Just me and 2 cooks, 40 seats, the recipes I grew up with. It opened last month. On the wall, there's a photograph of my mother and father from 1978, standing in front of the original restaurant. Underneath it says, "In memory of Rose and Thomas Chen, who taught me everything about food and love." Amy came to the opening. She brought flowers. She stays for the whole meal now, and she doesn't check her watch. Last week, I went to the cemetery where my parents are buried. I brought chrysanthemums, my mother's favorite. I sat on the bench near their headstone, and I told her about the restaurant, about Amy, about the life I'm building now, the life I can build because she made sure I had the means to do it. I'm not angry anymore. Not at David, not at Amy. They made their choices, and I made mine. My mother saw that, and she made her choice too. That video wasn't about punishing them. It was about honoring what mattered to her. Love isn't just a feeling. It's what you do when it's hard. It's showing up at 3 a.m. when someone is confused and scared. It's giving up your own life because someone else's life matters. There's a small garden behind the new restaurant. I planted it last month. Tomatoes, Thai basil, chrysanthemums, things my mother loved. They're just starting to grow, pushing up through the soil, reaching for light. Every morning, I go out there before we open, and I check on them. It reminds me that endings and beginnings are often the same thing. They say blood is thicker than water. I used to believe that. Now I think the full saying is more honest. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose, the promises we keep, matter more than the accidents of birth. My mother understood that. That's why she left me everything. Not because I asked for it, but because I earned it by showing up, day after day, when no one else did. What would you have done in my place? Would you have closed your restaurant? Would you have given 3 years of your life? I'd love to know. Leave a comment, and thank you, truly, for listening to my story.